The Battle of the Gullet. By the close of 129 AC, Lord Corlys Valerian's fleet had imposed a naval blockade on King's Landing. Within weeks, the city was gripped by food shortages. By the new year of 130 AC, the small folk began rioting. The hand of the king, Otto Hightower, knew the city could not be held for long without breaking the blockade. But the royal fleet had been destroyed earlier in the war, and the Greens had no navy of their own. So Tyrion Lannister, the Greens' master of coin, was sent to the free cities to hire a fleet from the Triarchy, the same alliance the Valerians had fought at the Stepstones 2 decades earlier. The Admiral Sherrico Lohar agreed to take payment in gold and Valerian territory. A fleet of around 90 warships was assembled at Tyrosh and sent west. The Triarchy fleet entered the Gullet, the narrow stretch of water guarding Blackwater Bay, on the 5th day of the new year, 130 AC. The Valerian ships, under Lord Corlys and his bastard kinsman Alan of Hull, met them there. Fire and Blood records the engagement as the bloodiest sea battle ever fought in Westerosi waters. The initial advantage went to the Triarchy, greater numbers, fresh ships, and the element of timing on their side. Then the dragons arrived. Prince Jacaerys, Rhaenyra's eldest son and named heir, flew in on Vermax. Scorpion bolts and arrows sent Vermax plunging into the water. Jacaerys jumped clear of the falling dragon, but was killed by Triarchy soldiers almost as soon as he hit the surface. Roused by the noise of battle, 4 other dragons took to the air from Dragonstone. Vermithor, claimed by Hugh Hammer, Silverwing, claimed by Ulf White, Seasmoke, claimed by Adam of Hull, and Sheepstealer, claimed by Nettles. These dragons devastated the Triarchy fleet, burning scores of ships. Stray squadrons broke off and attacked Driftmark itself, where Spicetown was destroyed and the seat of high tide burned. Of the 90 Triarchy ships that sailed, only 28 returned to the free cities. The Valerian fleet lost roughly a third of its strength. Corlys himself, when congratulated on the victory, said, "If this be victory, I pray I never win another." The Blacks also lost Jacaerys, Rhaenyra's presumptive heir. The battle at Rook's Rest. Viserys died in 129 AC, and within hours, Alicent Hightower's faction had crowned her eldest son Aegon at the Dragon Pit. Across Blackwater Bay on Dragonstone, Princess Rhaenyra, Viserys' named heir, was crowned queen by her own council. The Dance of Dragons had begun. In late 129 AC, Rhaenyra's son, Prince Lucerys, was killed at Storm's End by Aemond on Vhagar. In retaliation, the assassins Blood and Cheese were sent into the Red Keep, where they killed Aegon's son, young Jaehaerys. Daemon seized the great castle of Harrenhal in the Riverlands, opening a second front. Then, around mid-129 AC, the Green faction's military commander Sir Criston Cole, Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, designed a strategy to put the Blacks on the back foot through a series of small castle sieges in the Crownlands. After subduing Duskendale, he set his sights on Rook's Rest, a minor Crownlands castle held by House Staunton. The castle itself was of little importance. The point was to bait Rhaenyra into committing a dragon. Aemond and Vhagar, the largest living dragon in the world, were positioned in concealment nearby, with orders to pounce on whichever dragon answered the call. After much debate among Rhaenyra's council, Rhaenys, the queen who never was, volunteered to fly upon Meleys, the Red Queen. She arrived above Rook's Rest mid-siege and burned much of Cole's host in the open field. Then King Aegon, learning of the engagement and against his council's wishes, joined the battle uninvited on Sunfire. As Meleys grappled with Sunfire, Aemond emerged from cover and blasted both Rhaenys and Aegon's mounts with dragonfire. Sunfire fell from the sky, and Vhagar then tore into Meleys. Meleys and Rhaenys were killed. Sunfire's wing was shattered and his body burned. Aegon was found in the wreckage with broken bones and severe burns across most of his body. He was barely alive. The Blacks lost their fastest dragon and most experienced rider. The Greens effectively lost their king for months, with Aemond governing in his place. Sir Criston Cole was elevated to Hand of the King in the aftermath. Now we're jumping forward to the War of the Five Kings, nearly 2 centuries later. The Battle of the Blackwater. The 2 Baratheon brothers met in 299 AC outside Storm's End. Renly was assassinated, killed by a shadow wearing Stannis' face, born from Melisandre's magic. With Renly dead, many of the Stormlords who had followed him declared for Stannis. The Tyrells, however, withdrew to Highgarden, taking the strength of the Reach with them. Stannis now had a far stronger army than before, and a fleet of around 200 ships. He sailed for King's Landing, intending to take the capital from Joffrey. The city was defended by Tyrion Lannister, acting as hand while Tywin was away with the main Lannister host, trying to counter Robb Stark. Tyrion was outnumbered, but he had the city walls, the mud gate, and one hidden weapon, wildfire. After discovering that Cersei had been working with the Alchemist Guild, Tyrion took control of the wildfire stockpile and prepared a trap. As Stannis' ships entered Blackwater Bay, they found no royal fleet waiting for them. Instead, a single unmanned ship drifted out among them, leaking wildfire across the water. When the vessel reached the center of Stannis' fleet, Bronn fired a flaming arrow into the bay. The wildfire ignited, tearing through the ships in a massive green explosion. Much of Stannis' fleet was destroyed, but the battle was not over. Stannis survived, and he and enough of his men reached the shore to lead an assault on King's Landing. His soldiers raised ladders against the walls near the mud gate, and for a time the city looked close to falling. When Joffrey retreated to the Red Keep, Tyrion rallied the defenders himself and led a maneuver outside the gate to strike Stannis' men from the flank. During the fighting, Tyrion was attacked by Sir Mandon Moore of the Kingsguard. Mandon slashed him across the face and moved to finish him, but Podrick Payne saved Tyrion's life. The show never confirms who ordered the attempt on Tyrion's life, though Tyrion later suspected either Cersei or Joffrey. At dawn, the battle turned. Tywin arrived with the main Lannister host, joined by House Tyrell's forces under Sir Loras Tyrell. The combined Lannister-Tyrell army smashed into Stannis' forces from behind and broke the siege. Stannis was dragged from the battlefield by his own men and retreated to Dragonstone. The Lannisters survived the attack. The Tyrell alliance was sealed soon afterward, when Joffrey set Sansa aside and was betrothed to Margaery Tyrell. If you're enjoying this run-through, give the video a like. The Battle of Castle Black. By 300 AC, the others had begun stirring after thousands of years dormant. The free folk fled toward the wall in their tens of thousands, hoping to cross south before the dead caught them. Mance Rayder, a former crow turned king beyond the wall, united nearly all the free folk under one banner, the largest army the wildlings had ever raised, roughly 100,000 strong. His plan was to break through the wall by sheer weight of numbers. To improve those odds, he detached a force of Thenns under the Magnar Steer, along with raiders led by Tormund Giantsbane and Ygritte. This vanguard was to climb the wall away from Castle Black, circle through the Gift, and then attack the castle from the south, while Mance's main host struck the north face at the same time. Castle Black was defended by perhaps 100 brothers of the Night's Watch, led by acting Lord Commander Sir Alliser Thorne. Among them was Jon Snow. The wildling assault came in two waves. The southern force, Tormund, Ygritte, the Thenns, attacked after raiding the village of Molestown and reached the southern gate of Castle Black. The northern force struck the wall itself with mammoths, giants, and ladders. The brothers loosed barrels of pitch, lit arrows, and dropped the great anchor chain scythe down the northern face of the wall, sweeping climbers off in their hundreds. In the fighting at the courtyard, Ygritte was killed by an arrow from a boy named Ollie. She died in Jon Snow's arms. Jon killed the Thenn leader Styr with a hammer. The giant Mag the Mighty was killed in the tunnel beneath the wall, as Grenn and the brothers held the inner gate. Castle Black survived the night, but only just. Tormund was captured, the southern attackers were killed or driven back, and the main wildling host withdrew beyond bowshot. But Mance's army still vastly outnumbered the Watch, and Jon knew they could not survive another full assault. Jon walked north alone the following morning to speak with, or assassinate, Mance Rayder. Before he could complete the act, Stannis' army arrived from Eastwatch by the Sea, having sailed from Dragonstone, and broke Mance's host. The Battle of Hardhome. After Stannis broke Mance Rayder's host at the wall, the surviving thousands of free folk withdrew north and gathered at Hardhome, an ancient ruined settlement on the coast of the Shivering Sea. Hardhome had been a wildling town for centuries until it was destroyed in roughly 300 BC. Survivors of Mance's defeat now camped in its ruins, with nowhere left to go. Jon Snow, by now Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, understood that any wildling who died north of the wall would rise as a wight in the army of the dead. The free folk had to be brought south or they would swell the enemy's forces. He took a fleet of repurposed Stannis-aligned ships from Eastwatch and sailed for Hardhome with Tormund Giantsbane, a small force of Night's Watch brothers, and the giant One. The expedition arrived at Hardhome and negotiations with the wildling chieftains were difficult. Many distrusted the Watch. Jon and Tormund persuaded perhaps 5,000 free folk to begin boarding the ships. While the boarding was in progress, the army of the dead descended on the settlement. The dead overran the perimeter within minutes. One fought hand-to-hand at the Longhouse. Jon retrieved his Valyrian steel sword Longclaw. When the Walker's ice blade came down on Longclaw, the Valyrian steel held. The walker shattered into shards of ice on contact. This was the first on-screen confirmation that Valyrian steel could kill a White Walker. Jon and Tormund withdrew to the boats with as many free folk as could reach them. The remainder were left on the beach. The Night King walked to the water's edge, looked at the retreating Jon Snow, and raised his arms. Every wildling killed on the beach rose immediately as a White in his service. The dead now numbered thousands more than they had that morning. The Battle of the Bastards. After the Red Wedding, House Bolton seized Winterfell and the Wardenship of the North on behalf of the Iron Throne. Lord Roose Bolton was killed by his own legitimized bastard Ramsay around 302 AC. Ramsay, now Lord Bolton, held Sansa Stark captive at Winterfell, forced her into marriage and treated her brutally. Sansa escaped with the help of Theon Greyjoy and reached Castle Black, where she found Jon, recently revived from death. Jon and Sansa raised what banners they could, but most of the great northern houses had bent the knee to the Boltons or remained neutral. Their final host numbered perhaps 2,500, most of them free folk under Tormund Giantsbane, with smaller contributions from House Mormont under 10-year-old Lyanna Mormont, House Hornwood, House Mason, and a handful of others. Ramsay commanded around 5,000, including the Karstarks and the Umbers. The two armies met in an open field outside Winterfell. Ramsay opened the engagement by bringing out Rickon Stark, held hostage by the Umbers, then handed to the Boltons, releasing him onto the field and shooting him with arrows as he ran for Jon's line. The act baited Jon into a single rider charge ahead of his own host. The two armies collided where Jon stood. The Bolton cavalry surrounded the Stark wildling host on three sides and pressed inward. Jon was knocked down and nearly suffocated under the weight of his own routing men. At the moment when the Stark host was about to be destroyed, a column of cavalry appeared on the southern horizon. The Knights of the Vale, a substantial mounted force led by Lord Jon Royce, secretly summoned by Sansa weeks earlier. The Vale Knights struck the Bolton flank and shattered them. Ramsay retreated inside Winterfell. The walls were breached when Wun broke down the gate. The giant was killed in the act. Ramsay was captured, beaten by Jon, and afterwards eaten alive by his own starving hounds at Sansa's order. Jon Snow was declared king in the north by the surviving lords. The Battle of Meereen. Across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen had taken the city of Meereen as part of her campaign to liberate Slavers Bay. A group of former slavers calling themselves the Sons of the Harpy immediately resisted her rule, assassinating unsullied soldiers and freedmen in the streets. The cities of Astapor and Yunkai, which Daenerys had previously freed, slid back into slavery under their old masters within months. Daenerys fled on Drogon after an assassination attempt in the fighting pits of Daznak. In her absence, Tyrion governed Meereen. He negotiated a truce with the masters of Astapor, Yunkai, and Volantis. A truce the masters soon broke. A coalition fleet from the three slaver cities arrived in Slavers Bay and besieged Meereen by sea. The fleet bombarded the city, setting fires across the harbor district. Tyrion's forces, the Unsullied under Grey Worm, the Second Sons under Daario Naharis, and what remained of the freedmen militia were heavily outnumbered. Daenerys returned on Drogon and settled atop the Great Pyramid as the wise masters were inside negotiating with Tyrion. Her two other dragons, Rhaegal and Viserion, had been chained in the catacombs beneath the pyramid for over a year. Tyrion had unchained them earlier, and they emerged at the sound of Drogon's arrival. The three dragons then burned the Masters' fleet. The Masters tried to surrender. Daenerys had Grey Worm execute two of the three on the spot. By land, the newly arrived Dothraki Khalasar, sworn to Daenerys after she burned the calls at Vaes Dothrak, rode down the Sons of the Harpy in the city streets. Meereen was retaken within hours. The Battle of the Gold Road. After landing her armies at Dragonstone in Season 7, Daenerys' first few engagements were failures. The Greyjoy fleet under her ally Yara was destroyed by Euron Greyjoy of the Iron Islands in the open sea, and Yara was taken prisoner. An unsullied expedition to Casterly Rock found the seat lightly defended. Jaime had marched the main Lannister host south to take Highgarden, the seat of House Tyrell. Highgarden fell within days. Lady Olenna Tyrell was poisoned by Jaime. The Reach's gold, grain, and harvest stores were seized. The Lannister Tarly host, commanded by Sir Jaime with Lord Randall Tarly and his son Dickon, began the long march back toward King's Landing with wagons of plunder. The plan was to deliver enough gold to repay the Iron Bank of Braavos and resupply the crown. Daenerys, having lost 3 campaigns in a row, decided to commit personally. She mounted Drogon, took her Dothraki Khalasar, and intercepted the Lannister column on open ground. The Dothraki struck the rear of the column at a gallop. Drogon then arrived and began strafing the supply wagons. The Lannister line was smashed apart. Hundreds of men were burned to death. There was some resistance, and it came in the form of a scorpion, designed by Qyburn at Cersei's instruction, that had been positioned with the column. Sir Bronn of the Blackwater operated it and struck Drogon in the shoulder with a bolt, wounding but not killing the dragon. Jaime, after seeing Daenerys dismounted and vulnerable as she tried to pull the bolt from Drogon, took a spear and charged straight at her. Tyrion watched in horror from a nearby hill as his brother rode toward almost certain death. At the last second, Bronn tackled Jaime out of the path of Drogon's fire and into the Blackwater rush. Lord Randall Tarly and his son Dickon survived the rout, were captured, and later executed by Daenerys for refusing to bend the knee. The Long Night. At the end of Season 7, Jon had led a small party beyond the wall to capture a White and prove the threat of the dead to Cersei. When the mission went wrong, Daenerys flew north with her 3 dragons to rescue them. The Night King killed Viserion in mid-air with an ice spear. Riding the undead Viserion, the Night King destroyed a section of the wall at Eastwatch with blue dragonfire. The army of the dead crossed south. By Season 8, the living had fallen back to Winterfell. The defending host was one of the strangest coalitions Westeros had ever seen. Stark and Northern levies, Free Folk under Tormund, the Knights of the Vale under Jon Royce, the Unsullied under Grey Worm, Daenerys' Dothraki, Beric Dondarrion and Sandor Clegane, Theon Greyjoy and his Ironborn, the surviving Mormonts, and Daenerys' 2 remaining dragons, Drogon and Rhaegal. Even with all these forces combined, the army of the dead far outnumbered them. Bran Stark, now the three-eyed raven, knew that the Night King would come for him because he carried the memory of the world. If the Night King wanted an endless night, he had to erase that memory. Bran would wait in the Godswood as bait, while Theon, returning to atone for his betrayal of House Stark, volunteered to defend him with the Ironborn. Around them, the rest of the host fortified Winterfell's outer defenses, trenches, courtyards, and walls. The battle began in darkness. The Dothraki rode into the field with arcs lit by Melisandre's fire, with Jorah Mormont riding among them. One by one, the flames vanished in the distance as the Dothraki charge was swallowed by the dead. The surviving riders fled back toward Winterfell. The Unsullied formed up to cover the retreat, but the dead came in overwhelming numbers and forced the living back behind the trenches and walls. Inside Winterfell, the dead breached the defenses and flooded into the courtyards. The crypts, where many had been sent for safety, became a trap when the Night King raised the corpses of the Stark dead from their tombs. The casualties were enormous. Ed Tollett died saving Sam. Beric Dondarrion died protecting Arya. Young Lyanna Mormont was crushed by a giant White, but not before stabbing it in the eye. Theon charged the Night King and was killed almost instantly. Jorah died defending Daenerys. When the battle was over and dawn came, Melisandre walked out beyond the walls, removed her necklace, and died. In the Godswood, the Night King reached Bran and drew his blade. At that instant, Arya leapt at him from behind with her Valyrian steel dagger. The Night King caught her by the throat and by the hand holding the weapon. Arya dropped the dagger into her free hand and drove it into him. The Night King shattered. Every White Walker shattered with him. The army of the dead was destroyed, and the long night ended before it could reach the rest of Westeros. The Battle of King's Landing. The survivors of Winterfell were badly depleted. Daenerys had lost roughly half her Dothraki and Unsullied, and the northern forces had suffered heavily as well. Still, she marched south soon afterward. On the journey south, while flying near Dragonstone, her dragon Rhaegal was killed in mid-air by Euron Greyjoy's scorpion-armed fleet, pierced by multiple bolts before falling into the sea. Daenerys' advisor Missandei was captured in the same attack and later executed at the walls of King's Landing on Cersei's orders. Daenerys gathered her remaining forces outside King's Landing, the Unsullied, the surviving Dothraki, the Northern levies, and Drogon. Cersei held the city with Lannister soldiers, the City Watch, the Iron Fleet, Scorpions mounted on the walls and ships, and the Golden Company under Harry Strickland. Tyrion told Daenerys that if the people of King's Landing rang the bells, it would mean surrender. The plan was for the attacking forces to stop once the bells rang. The assault began from the air. Daenerys flew Drogon down on the Iron Fleet and destroyed it in Blackwater Bay, breaking through the scorpion fire before the crews could bring him down. She then turned on the city walls, burning the scorpion positions along the battlements. Drogon blasted through the city's outer defenses, and the Golden Company, positioned outside the walls, was broken almost instantly. The Unsullied, Dothraki, and Northern forces entered the city. Within minutes, the Lannister soldiers began throwing down their swords. The city had fallen. The bells of King's Landing rang out in surrender. Instead of accepting the surrender, Daenerys turned Drogon on the city itself. She began burning King's Landing street by street, soldiers, civilians, homes, markets, and finally the Red Keep. On the ground, Grey Worm resumed the killing, and the Unsullied and Dothraki followed, slaughtering surrendering Lannister soldiers and civilians alike. Jon tried to stop the massacre, but it was too late. In the wreckage of the Red Keep, Sandor Clegane found his elder brother, Ser Gregor, the Mountain, reanimated by Qyburn, and fought him as the castle collapsed around them. Sandor drove them both through a broken wall into the fire below. Jaime reached the shore below the Red Keep, fought and killed Euron, and then found Cersei. The two tried to escape through the cellars, but the way out was blocked. They died together beneath the Red Keep, as Daenerys' attack brought the castle down on top of them. That's every on-screen battle in Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon so far. Now to a battle that, frustratingly, we didn't get to see during House of the Dragon Season 3. The Battle by the Lakeshore. After Daemon Targaryen seized Harrenhal for Rhaenyra, Aemon Targaryen and Sir Criston Cole marched back into the Riverlands for Aegon II. Their army moved north through the region, burning villages, punishing defiant houses, and forcing riverlords to declare for the Greens. To strengthen their position, Lord Jason Lannister was ordered to march east from the Westerlands with a Lannister host of at least 8,000 men. But the Riverlands were not subdued. The local lords, battered by months of raids and occupation, began to gather in force for Rhaenyra. Jason Lannister was killed at the Red Fork, with the elderly Humphrey Lefford assuming command. Meanwhile, Lord Cregan Stark of Winterfell, who had already pledged the North to the Black Cause, sent 2,000 veteran warriors south. These men became known as the Winter Wolves, older Northmen, many past 40, who had left home expecting never to return. They were commanded by Lord Roderick Dustin, the elderly Lord of Barrowton. The two black forces, the River Lords and the Winter Wolves, came together near the God's Eye, the great lake beside Harrenhal at the heart of the Riverlands. When the Lannister host reached the area, they found themselves facing a combined black army, with no easy path to Aemon's forces. The Westermen had marched into a trap. The battle began with the Winter Wolves charging directly into the Lannister spearmen. They attacked again and again, 5 times in succession, losing men with every charge. At last, the Lannister line gave way. The Westermen were then hit from multiple sides by the Riverlords and driven backwards, step by step, into the reeds and shallows of the God's Eye. By nightfall, the lake itself had become a killing ground. Hundreds of Westermen were cut down in the water. Hundreds more drowned beneath the weight of their armor. By nightfall, at least 2,000 men lay dead, making it the bloodiest land battle of the Dance of the Dragons. Lord Humphrey Lefford was killed in the rout. The surviving Winter Wolves, perhaps only a third of their original number, gave the slaughter its grim name, the Fish Feed. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives. See you next time.